got another one for you. Now, unfortunately, we do not have the original version of this. This is a modern replica by Auto Ordnance, but today we are doing the Thompson. Ah, yes, the old Thompson. She sure is a thing of beauty. Now, this one here, it's got a little rust on it. I mean, it's a really nice rifle, but it's got a little rust on it. That's because the guy who owned this, his house got flooded here a little while ago, and yeah, it's got a little rust on it, but it's all right. I'm sure any Thompson on the beaches of Normandy would have had a little rust on him too. So the story of the Thompson. Well, that all starts back in the Spanish-American War. Whenever a soldier in the, I believe he was in the, I'm pretty sure he was in the National Guard, because whenever he got shipped out to Cuba, he was armed with a 45-70 trapdoor. Everybody else is using Mausers, Craig Jorgensen's, and the thing that he really didn't like, which was the Maxim machine gun. And that was being used on them. And in one of his memoirs, he actually talked about it. He said, I sit there while we were taking fire from a fully automatic machine gun, and I was sitting there trying to load single rounds into my 45-70. And he said, and every time we'd shoot, the black powder would give away our position. And I thought to myself, if I have anything to do with it, no soldier should ever have to be in this situation ever again. He said, I want every individual soldier to have the firepower of a Maxim. So he comes back to the U.S. and after the war, and he starts development on a new submachine gun. Now he'd seen, what's interesting though is the fact that there really weren't a whole lot of submachine guns before this one. He starts development, really during World War I. And there was a few European models that were coming out. But he was bound and determined he was going to give the boys in the trenches this little gat. And mind you, that version would have had a lot shorter barrel. This has the 16-inch barrel to be U.S. compliant. It is to be legally compliant. This is a semi-auto version. So what happened was he goes back, he starts doing some testing, he gets his initial design all put together, and he's trying to figure out what caliber to chamber it in. So he tries several different calibers, and the way he tries it out, I loved his testing method. He'd go to a local locker plant, and there would be cattle hanging up, and he would ask them to go take them out back, and he would shoot them with a round out of a same length barrel as what his Thompson would be, and he'd see what the damage was. Well, he's going through, he's shooting with 32 auto, that was not very good. He shoots it with 9mm, and he was not impressed. And then he's like, well, I'm going to go pick up this little round that they have in that Colt government model, 1911. This big old fat slug right here, the good old 45 ACP. He liked that. It worked really good for destroying cattle carcasses. So that's what he chambered it in. Now, so I gotta take a little break from talking. I'm gonna do a little shooting here. I'm actually gonna start out with trying to hit some of the targets on the hill, kind of clean them up a little bit. So I'll just show you how this thing is loaded. It's kind of a weird little loading system here. So you'll see this T-slot on the back of the magazine. You'll see a corresponding T-slot in the receiver. You make two, and then slap it up. And normally you would cock your bolt to the rear. It would stay open. You'd pull the trigger, and it would fire when the bolt closed. However, this one is a closed bolt. So we'll switch it from safe to fire and see if we can hit some of them clays and whatnot on that hill. I'm going to use this peep sight because I can't even see the other one. That jerk. Oh my, this thing is so mild to shoot. I have no clue where I'm hitting. Yeah, this thing is not designed to be a long-range rifle. So, let's see here. Let me shoot it a little more how it's intended to be shot. I may not have hit anything, but I'm sure if there was a man standing there, he would not want to be standing there for very long. So yeah, this is kind of a cool little gun. There is no recoil to this thing, by the way. I'm going to try a few more shots here. I'm going to try this joke of a rear sight on the, if you can see that little notch, that is a very, very tiny notch. So let's switch her from safe to fire. I'm going to try to hit some of these plays in the middle maybe with this thing. Okay, I saw where it hit that time. I'm hitting way left. There we go. Okay, yeah, it's hitting a little to the left, so I'm having to hold it a little to the right. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the history of this thing. Go ahead and clear it. Now normally, if this was an open bolt, just taking the magazine out would have cleared it. But thanks to certain laws, that doesn't work so well. All right, so Mr. Thompson goes and he develops this gun in the lovely 45 Auto. Now, he has it all put together, all ready to go. And, well, he actually names it, get this, the name for the thing that was supposed to go to World War I. You know, most guns you'd have like the 1903, the 1911, you know, they name them after the year they were designed. Oh no, Mr. Thompson wanted to make this thing sound real mean, so he called it the Annihilator. Yeah, that's what its name was. It was the Annihilator. So, on November 11th, 1918, there are several thousand of these things sitting in crates in New York ready to go to France. Only one problem. If any of you know your history, you'll know that November 11th, 1918 was not a very good time to be getting ready to go to France because, well, you're not going. Literally, the day they shipped them out, or they hauled them to the docks ready to haul off, was the day that peace were declared. So, now Mr. Thompson has a little bit of a conundrum here. He has a whole lot of Thompson submachine guns and nowhere to sell them. He can sell them to the civilian market. It was legal back then. But anyhow, he could sell them to the civilian market back then, and there's actually pictures he had of his advertising of a cowboy holding off rustlers with a full auto Thompson and with a 75 round drum, which is flat out hilarious if you ask me. But he, so he was having trouble with that because back then, the price for your average Thompson was $200 a piece. Doesn't sound like much now. Yeah, that was quite a bit back in the day. So just to put this into perspective, you had a choice. You could buy a brand new car, or you could go buy two Thompson submachine guns. I can't say which choice I would have made back then, but yeah, I don't know. Anyhow, this thing, so he couldn't sell it on the civilian market very much. He couldn't sell it to the military. He did find another seller though, a little controversial nowadays. There were some local lads in Ireland who were really looking for some submachine guns. And lo and behold, all over the news in Britain, they're like, holy smokes, these little Irish dudes have got these really mean little submachine guns in 45 Auto, and they can spray a lot of lead downrange. Where did that come from? Everybody kind of looks at Mr. Thompson. He's like, whoops, well, had to make some money somewhere. So that was where everybody really started to take notice that this thing is no joke. So there actually is, kind of funny, I may put it in here, there's actually a song written by Irish rebels about the Thompson submachine gun. I think it goes something to the lines of where the bayonets flash, or the helmets flash and the rifles crash to the echoes of a Thompson gun. So yeah, very popular in Ireland. After that, everybody started to take notice. The British definitely took notice, and mind you, many years have passed, and this thing is, World War II is starting to gear up. Another group of people who noticed were the gangsters in the U.S. They noticed a lot, and that's where it got names like Chicago typewriter and everything else like that. And that's actually, this design is responsible single-handedly for the NFA Act of 36. Because what happened was, is a guy went to go make a hit on another gang member, full auto 75 round drum, drive-by, sprays those 75 rounds of ammo out, and kills a little girl standing next to him. Now that wasn't the gun's fault, it was the guy who did it. That brought up outrage everywhere, and that was whenever the NFA Act was passed in 1936. Oh, and another thing, this makes an excellent Valentine's Day gift for your local friends. That was another thing that added to this not very looked well upon by Uncle Sam. So that was the 1936 NFA bill gets passed, and now you have to pay a $200 tax stamp, which, remember, the submachine gun alone cost $200. Now it's going to cost you $400, which is essentially the price of a brand new car at the time to have one. So, go along a little further down the road, after the whole gangster thing, World War II is kicking off. And Britain's sitting there, and they're making all sorts of negotiations with Hitler, with Germany. They're like, oh, you know, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And then, eventually, 1939 rolls around, Germany invades Poland. Then Germany invades Czechoslovakia. And then they roll into Austria. And then in June 1940, they roll into France. And Britain is like, we were not expecting this. We don't have enough guns. So, they go and they're like, you know that them little Irish fellers running around them with them Thompson guns? And they're like, hey, Mr. Thompson, would you care to sell some of those to us? And he's like, well, sure, I won't ever turn down a buck. So he sold these to the British. They sold quite a few of them to the British, or they loaned them. It was the Lend-Lease program. They lent them to the Brits. And that worked really good until Dunkirk. And then America, that was when we realized, oh, we're about to get involved in this thing too. Britain, we want all our Thompsons back. So that was how that all went down. And so this place on Normandy would have been, you would have probably had mostly guys getting off the carriers, getting off the amphibious landing craft, just like the M1 Garand. And mind you, this thing is not very accurate, but whenever you've got a 20 or 30 round magazine and you can get set up on some sort of rest, set your sight to 300 yards, sorry, and you can sit there and you can just sit there and dump rounds into those concrete bunkers, no problem. That's going to make somebody duck. I don't care who you are. You'd be like, oh, it's just a submachine gun at 300 yards. Yes, but still, you're taking full auto fire from several guys with these things. Not exactly ideal. So this thing served all the way through World War II. Fun fact, it served all the way up until I'm sure you can find somewhere where somebody's still using one today, but it was still being used into the 6-Day War. The Egyptian army was using these against Uzis. Think about that for a minute. That's kind of insane. So, all right, we're going to do a little close range shooting here. What this thing is actually designed for. I'll put my ears on here. And, I don't know, I might run through 15, 20 rounds into this here, oops, better make sure that locks in there. There we go. Into this here group of cans right here. You see them with the camera? All right, let's see here. That was just on semi-automatic. That is where something like this comes in really great handy. It comes in great, oh man, that would be, if I was in World War II and somebody said, hey, you want a Thompson? I wouldn't turn them down, that's for sure. especially I could just, you know, this thing on full auto, they are insane when they are on full auto. Man, that's cool. So initially, these would be issued to your squad leaders in your infantry companies, or maybe even a team leader. However, there are documents, and I've heard firsthand from my Uncle Frank talk about. I asked him. I said, Uncle Frank, what did you use in World War II? He said, well, he said, I started out using an M1 Garand, and then I got a Thompson. I looked at him. I said, what rank were you? He's like, I was a private. I was like, where'd you get a Thompson? The old man just got a big old grin on his face and said, ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies. So I'm assuming he probably borrowed it from one of his officers or NCOs. So yeah, this thing would have been very effective for Normandy. What really would have been effective for is going into, like, whenever they started clearing cities, what they would do is they'd send a group of guys, British and American, with Thompsons and Stens, and they would send them in there into a building, sweep every German soldier out, get them out in the street, and then there would be a guy out in the street armed with a 1919 or a BAR, and they would mow them down in the street. That was their tactics for back then for clearing buildings. Pretty effective, if you ask me. So, I guess that's about it for this video. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.